Welcome to the Arches at Home video lectures. In this lecture, I will give you an overview of the cognitive deficits that can occur after a stroke. Cognitive disturbances are very frequent after a stroke. Some studies report that up to 78% of patients will present some form of cognitive deficit. Individuals with cognitive deficits also have a higher risk to develop dementia and are more physically impaired. Having a cognitive impairment lowers one's quality of life significantly. Patients become incapable to do their daily activities, such as grocery shopping, cooking, or dressing on their own. Also, many cognitively impaired survivors cannot return to their previous job. Cognitive deficits also limit the social interactions that a person can have, since they affect communication and meaningful interaction. However, what do we consider as cognitive deficits? Most commonly, patients are suffering from memory problems, problems with attention, spatial awareness issues, and problems with executive function. It appears that between 23 and 55% of the patients will have an impaired memory capacity after stroke. Memory deficits seem to continue to persist in 11 to 31% of the cases after a year. Patients appear to report memory problems more frequently than complaints in any other cognitive domain. Memory rehabilitation focuses on teaching the patient to compensate of the loss of memory capacity by either using internal or external memory aids. Only few methods have tried to restore impaired memory functions. There is currently no evidence that memory treatment has any effect in objectively improving memory function, although there are subjective reports of improvement. This could point to the notion that patients learned to cope with their memory problems in their daily activities. Problems with attention are equally frequent, and estimates range between 46 and 92% at the acute phase. Although there are reports of recovery, it is estimated that in 20 to 50% of the cases, attentional deficits may persist for years. Attention appears not to be a unitary process, but consists of various components. Roughly, we could distinguish between alertness and arousal, which is the ability and readiness to respond, selective attention, which is the ability to focus on specific stimuli while ignoring others, sustained attention, which is the ability to maintain attention over a period of time, spatial attention, which is the ability to detect and direct attention to all sides of the space, and lastly, divided attention, which includes multitasking. As such, a deficit in these components can affect higher cognitive functions, such as language or memory as well. There is currently only weak evidence that rehabilitation can actually aid attentional deficits. A meta-analysis could only detect a significant effect of treatment on divided attention, but not for any other attention component or the functional abilities of daily living. Deficits in spatial awareness or spatial attention are typically referred to as spatial neglect. Spatial neglect means that a patient is unable to report, respond, or orient to novel or meaningful stimuli that are presented in the site opposite to the brain lesion. Neglect can have serious detrimental effects on the patient's ability to carry out everyday tasks. It can be observed that patients only eat half of their plates, shave only half of their face, and even ignore people and objects within their neglected site. This inattention is not due to a sensory or motor defect, but due to a failure within the higher order perception of the contralateral space. Incident rates can vary widely between studies and are sometimes reported as high as 90% of patients. Many patients appear to experience anosognosia, meaning that they are not aware of their deficit, which makes detection and treatment difficult. Although numerous treatment methods to treat neglect have been proposed, their effectiveness remains inconclusive. Executive functions are brain processes that are necessary to control goal-oriented behavior and to be able to respond to new situations. Also, they allow us to inhibit responses, solve problems, and correct for errors. For instance, patients might find it difficult to learn new skills or dressing themselves. Executive functions draw on several other cognitive processes to work together, such as working memory and attention. It is estimated that roughly 75% of patients will experience troubles with executive functions. However, currently, there is no evidence that rehabilitation can actually improve the patient's situation. Most importantly, most patients will have several cognitive deficits at the same time. In a study that included almost 1,300 stroke survivors, only 6% had a deficit in one or two domains, whereas 50.6% had 6 to 10 co-occurring symptoms. Another study demonstrated that the occurrence of a cognitive deficit is not so dependent on the location of the stroke. Certain lesion locations have led to impairments in up to 6 cognitive domains. This highlights that cognitive functions rely on a network of brain regions. A stroke might cause a disturbance to the network, and therefore patients can express a multitude of symptoms. Unfortunately, many studies and rehabilitation methods focus on investigating or treating a specific deficit, and numerous dedicated cognitive therapies have been proposed. Although some patients appear to improve in some of them, the improvements appear not to persist beyond the training and do not improve everyday function. We believe that this could be due to the reason that there aren't many effective cognitive treatments available, because training a single cognitive skills might not be the most efficient thing to do. After all, many activities of daily living require different cognitive abilities for successful execution. Take, for instance, driving a car. Many patients have lost the ability to safely drive a car. Many would like to regain the ability of driving, since it gives them mobility and also autonomy. But in order to drive well, the patient needs to draw from several skills. The drivers need to be able to deal with the traffic, the signs and the distractions. They therefore need to use selective attention and be cognitively flexible to react to changing situations. Drivers need to constantly scan the road ahead and the mirrors at the front and at the side and in the back. They therefore have to rely on spatial awareness and sustained attention. The drivers often need to rely on memory, on how to navigate, as it is dangerous to rely on the GPS or looking at Google Maps on the phone. It is therefore important that cognitive rehabilitation treats and trains various cognitive domains together to repair and enhance a patient's performance in everyday life. Another issue in cognitive rehabilitation is that co-occurring post-stroke depression is often not detected, although it is estimated to be very common after stroke. One study has estimated that up to 31% of patients might be facing post-stroke depression. Depressed patients are not only more dependent on others, but they also show lower cognitive functioning. It could therefore be that a patient performs poorly in neuropsychological tests, not only because of the cognitive deficits, but also because an undiagnosed depression. It is therefore important to consider depression when evaluating and treating cognitive deficits. We have reached the end of this lecture. Please try to answer for yourself the following 3 questions. What are the main cognitive domains affected after stroke? How does spatial neglect manifest itself? What is the main issue in current rehabilitation approaches? Thank you for listening.